This is the Dzogchen Sende Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For multiple decades, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that you wouldn't have to. It is Obi-Wan Kenobi early Wednesday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after reviewing the Buddha's Eightfold Path of Enlightenment. We'll begin by reviewing a tale of two archetypes. That of the Buddha, also known as Gautama or Shakyamuni, and his foolish cousin Devadatta. Devadatta is the archetype of patriarchy or institutional Buddhism. That's all about being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. The Buddha, or Gautama, or Shakyamuni, is the opposite. Where his cousin was rigid, he is flexible. Where his cousin was fearful, he was loving. Where his cousin was superstitious, the Buddha was rational. Where his cousin was controlling, Gautama was laid back. Where Devadatta was elitist, Gautama was egalitarian. Where Devadatta was cryptic, Gautama was lucid. Where Devadatta was competitive, Gautama was cooperative. Where Devadatta was cruel, Gautama was kind. So instead of exploring the Eightfold Path through the lens of institutional Buddhism, I'm going to explore it, understandably, through the lens of Proto-Buddhism, also known as matriarchy. What is enlightenment? Enlightenment, my friends, is simply mastery of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. But what is meant by mastery? When we master something, anything, and we've gotten so good at it that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. For instance, as children, we came to master using the commode instead of our diapers, brushing our teeth, tying our shoes, riding a bike, no less, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Not only is it possible to master the Buddha's Eightfold Path, but in the second to the final passage, in the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, and the second to the last passage of the Buddha's discourse on the four bases of mindfulness, he explained that one could master this path in as little as 7 days. We're not talking 7 lifetimes. We're not talking about the length of the birth and destruction of 3 universes. We're talking about just a week. Mastering this path, once again, does not mean that we stop feeling certain emotions or we only feel certain emotions. It simply means that we've gotten so good at the Buddha's tool chest of techniques that we apply them spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. The dynamos of the path, the powerhouses that make this accomplishment possible in such a short period of time, are the 7th and 8th folds of the path. Mindfulness is the 7th fold of the path. Let's explore. There's a lot of teachings on the subject. Most of it contradict each other. I find it really clarifies things to explore this through the metaphoric lens of neuroscience. Thank you for the love. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are already wired to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, which functions as the core of our sympathetic nervous system. It is evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all mind's antics of seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. All of them, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the convenient to the arduous, from the glorious to the grotesque. But what are we to do with that which we notice? That brings us to meditation, which is the eighth fold of the path. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access both the tippy top as well as the very bottom of our spinal cord. These two regions, working as a team, function as the core of our parasympathetic nervous system. It is evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release during each exhalation. So here's the wild thing. Simply by sitting and breathing and watching and resting every 12 hours or so, we cannot help but master the first fold of the path. The wise view of reality that supports release. As we relax into our exhalation, all that we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Now, way back in fourth grade, I was taught, you were probably taught too, that a simile is only as effective as it is relatable. I had to be taught that because as an autistic child, my special interests of Star Trek were not as popular as everybody else's special interests of sports. And so a lot of my similes fell on deaf ears. So if that's the case, if a simile must be something relatable, then we have to ask the question, what is a real-world example of a non-graspable vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although could look tantalizing to the eye, could feel non-graspable to the hand? And so whether we're dealing with no self or emptiness, there are both just figures of speech to help us to understand that which is naturally occurring during each exhalation. So on the path of institutional Buddhism and patriarchy, we are so enamored, we're so with our controlling tendencies and our rigid tendencies that we compete against our own autonomic nervous system to actively focus and actively analyze. However, on the matriarchy's path of proto-Buddhism, we passively cooperate with our autonomic nervous system. Now, does this make us stupid? No. because this will be made more clear when we get to the sixth fold, so bear with me. We know what it looks like. Okay. I'm forever grateful to both Prahe Vajra of contemporary Pakistan's Swat Valley, who the Tibetans refer to as Garam Dorje, as well as the late Tulku Thondup, who insisted that the highest love is the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of Hatha Yoga or Trek Cho that is simply noticing and relaxing in harmony with our breathing. It is such an inevitable byproduct of sitting and breathing and watching and resting perhaps once every 12 hours or so that we can't help but mentally practice kind intention, which Karma Chakme Rinpoche insisted was the essence of the Bodhisattva vows, wherein we figuratively pole vault over jealousy's obstructions to omniscience. The more we sit and breathe and watch and rest, the more we cannot help but perform the interpersonal practice of kind communication. The more we cannot help but physically perform the physical practice of kind conduct, which is the non-violent essence of the Pratimoksha vows, again, according to Karma Chakme Rinpoche of the Karma Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. The more we sit and breathe and watch and rest, the more we cannot help but circumstantially practice kind communication, which is where we depart from capitalism's cruelty and competition and intuitively are drawn to communism's compassion and cooperation. And now we come to the sixfold that I told you of. So a lot of people are scared that by passively cooperating with our autonomic nervous system, we will lose creativity and that we will lose intelligence. But here's what really happens. The more we sit and breathe and watch and rest, the more our choices and utterances and deeds flow, not from contrived calculations, nor from wild scatterness, but instead from love's deeply centered spontaneity. This is known by many names. Some would call it right effort. Some call it effortless effort. Some people call it doing without doing. Some people prefer Chinese and call it Wu Wei. Some people call it going with the flow. Some people call it being in the zone. Some people call it expedient means. But this is the way to ensure that we use all the regions of our central nervous system in the most sustainable way. This is the key that unlocks the vault to true genius, both analytical as well as creative. So now that we've lauded the benefits of sitting and breathing and watching and resting, let's practice that right now. The mindfulness and meditation of clarity and letting go. As we passively notice air enter our nostrils, let's silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb, watch. As we passively notice air exit our nostrils, let's silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb rest. You've probably noticed I use the word passive twice. You see, it's a great big mistake for us to actively focus upon our breath or our nostrils. Doing so will so exhaust the front of our brain that it triggers the amygdala at the bottom of our brain, which functions as the seat of anxiety and aggression. Instead, we treat our nostrils and our breath the way a piano student treats the sound of their metronome, holding it in passive peripheral awareness. The moment you have a specific question about the philosophies or techniques that support mindfulness and meditation, do not hesitate to type your questions in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 13 minutes or so. This is my birthday, and like most people, I'm subject to all the emotional vulnerability that most people are subject to on this day, and there's no place that I'd rather be than meditating with you. As we rest in our exhalation, whatever turmoil or tranquility we watched during our previous inhalation could feel as if they were melting into the simplicity of just emotion. So emotions are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. They do not harm us. They do not help us. They simply are. The question is simply not what do we feel, but what do we do with that which we feel? And the answer is watch them and rest in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. Let us use the tip of our left index finger to support the first knuckle on our right index finger, palms up in our lap. I misspoke. Let us slide the tip of our, once we've used the tip of our left index finger to support the first knuckle of our right index finger, let's slide that left index finger up to the right index finger's second knuckle. Palms up in our lap. Let's shift gears to mindfulness and meditation of bliss and letting go. Let's use the tip of our left middle finger to support the lower knuckle of our right middle finger, palms up in our lap. As we passively notice our chest swelling with breath, let us silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb, feel. As we passively notice our chest subtly sinking as we exhale, let us silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb, rest. And remember, we're not actively focusing on our chest. We're holding our chest in passive peripheral awareness in a manner similar to the manner in which a piano student regards the sound of the metronome. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. In approximately 11 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's dusk practice of Meditate Like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.